Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavnibhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. I'd like to welcome all the guests who are here for yet another interesting discussion on the topic of reading Srila Prabhupada's books every day, which is part of the ministry's project. Books are the basis, a very important initiative to establish how reading Srila Prabhupada's books is so important for our personal lives and for our movement as a whole. Today, as a guest, I have what people in the world would call a friend, guide, philosopher, and I call him a philosopher, a friend, and a teacher. Perhaps one of the most loved teacher because of the reciprocation of affection that he gives to most of his students. I'd like to welcome His Grace Atul Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, thank you for arranging the program and encouraging me to talk about reading Prabhupada's books.
Dandavats Prabhu, and thank you for accepting to speak to us today on this topic. And you, as I know, are one of those devotees who read Prabhupada's books every day. And we all relish what we hear from you because of your own absorption in Prabhupada's books. So a brief introduction. His Grace Atul Krishna Prabhu joined the movement in 1985, a time where some of the viewers were just about born. He's traveled quite a bit around the world, and he teaches all over the world. He speaks many languages, out of which Bengali is a language that Prabhu speaks. And through his service, he spent time in Bangladesh and many other countries. So Atul Krishna Prabhu, you joined the movement in 1985 in Melbourne, Australia. How did that happen? And what was your first interaction with His Divine Grace, His words and books?
I was a student in the RMIT, Melbourne, Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. It's quite a prestigious institute, IT institute. But I wasn't actually studying the hard sciences. I was studying fine arts. They had a fine arts department there. So I was there, and that was in the city in Melbourne. And we had our restaurant, like Food for Life restaurant. It was like a budget restaurant. It was called Crossways. And it was just not far from the college at all. And so I'd go every day actually to take prasadam at the center. and then usually I'd take prasadam, and, you know, in those days we had TVs and big DVDs, you know, plug in. So they had like an area where a lot of people came into prasadam, and then they had the upstairs area, which was a lounge area with cushions, and you could sit around and lie around, and low tables. And they had this TV there, and they'd play DVDs of videos of Prabhupada and different things all day. So usually I'd go to college in the morning, go for lunch at the restaurant, and then I'd eat so much halava, and I'd just lie around on the cushions in the afternoon, and I wouldn't go back to college. And I befriended devotees in this way, and then eventually, you know, we started going to the temple.
Most Aussies prefer to go to the pub and have a drink. That's quite extraordinary. What inspired you to go and have vegetarian food? Well,
I mean, it's not that, you know, it's not that we were any different from most of the Aussies. And actually, if at college, I remember if you ever wanted to wanted to have a meeting with one of the professors, then you'd usually find them in the pubs, which were surrounding the college. You know?
Yes.
Complete parikrama. You could go on pub parikrama of the college. I mean, it's not that we've given up all of those things, but I mean, the prasadam, what can I say? But we were students, and the prasadam was wonderful, and it was also cheap. I mean, I think it was free in those days. You do a bit of seva, you clean and things like that. So anyway, we were attracted in this way. But on that topic, the devotees, one day I saw a son, actually Krishna Prabhu, you know, Krishna Prabhu. I mean, so many stages in my devotional life, I was inundated with oceans of mercy. One ocean of mercy was that in Melbourne, Mahaprabhu Mandir, when I joined, Krishna Prabhu was the head pujari. And he would regularly cook the feasts. And he would cook, I mean, he was, even there's a story about Korma that all the devotees had gone to Melbourne town hall to see Prabhupada. Prabhupada was in Melbourne. Prabhupada visited Melbourne. That's another, great blessing that I have, that I joined into Prabhupada's temple, the temple that Prabhupada installed the deities and lived in that temple. It was the only property owned by the movement in Australasia. So I think from 74 to 77, Prabhupada visited 3 or 4 times annually and stayed several weeks in Melbourne in those rooms. And actually, I just lived. I was just a few, the next suburb, just a 20-minute walk, you could say, from the temple. I was living there as I was 12 years old when Prabhupada was coming. But at that time, my consciousness wasn't awakened to the reality of the significance of Prabhupada's presence on the planet. But I heard about Prabhupada in the newspaper and things like that. So Korma was cooking.
Did you also have a background in yoga or mysticism?
Yeah, I mean, at college and stuff. Once we left school, we went to college and we were reading all the books on yoga and the library and Theosophical Society. There was a Theosophical Society just opposite the college, and we'd go there and hang out there and read books and research on Samaras in the Theological Society. That was that type of thing. And but I remember back on Korma, one time all the devotees had gone to the Melbourne town hall for a program. And Korma was the pujari. He was the only devotee left in the temple. He was doing the arati, 7 o'clock arati. And he was singing, Jayo, Jayo, Gaura Chandre, Arutika Shobha. He was alone in the temple doing the arati, singing. And he didn't know Prabhupada came into the temple to take darshan before going to the program. And he's standing offering the arati, singing, and Prabhupada's watching. And then Prabhupada turned to his servant and he said, Korma Dev. Korma Dev. And then another time, the story of the servant said that Prabhupada was taking prasadam in Melbourne, and he asked who made these puris. And the servant, Korma made the puris. And Prabhupada said, the devotee who made these puris is following the principles perfectly. So we were influenced a lot by Korma. He was a brahmachari actually in those days, and head pujari. And the standards in Melbourne Temple were so wonderful. And the prasadam, he would cook the feast. He would cook the feast, Sunday feast, and then he would do the kirtan, Sunday feast kirtan, and then sometimes give the lecture as well. It was such an inundation of mercy from Prabhu. And he was so wonderful in kirtan. He was an artist, a very creative person, cook and kirtan. So that was the environment. And then he was going to the restaurant. He would go to that Crossways restaurant and distribute the prasadam there. And so I'll tell you the story, seeing as that you've asked about it. There was a sign on the Bay Maria. They give Bay Maria style prasadam. There's a sign, we want help from students from RMIT to help us set up a club there, a vegetarian club. And I saw the sign and I thought, I actually felt guilty. I don't know what the philosophical significance of this, but I felt guilty that, I have to help because I'm eating so much prasadam here. How could I be so shameless that I don't? They're asking for help. How many people are from that college? Probably not too many. So I can help a little, right? So, and I said to Korma, I said, well, I'm from that place, I can help. And he looked at me and he said, okay. And he was a very intense person. He said, well, we need someone to set up a committee. You have to go to the student, board and you say you want to start a club. And so you'll need a president, a secretary, and a few people. We have to get a few people to join the club. And then you start the club, and then the club functions will be that once a week, the Hare Krishnas will come and distribute the food. It was a vegetarian club, and they'll come and distribute vegetarian food. So, if it was a student, or if it's initiated project, then the student body would give facility. It didn't matter what you do. So this club was that the Hare Krishnas would come and give prasadam. That's what I wrote on the application. They said, fine, gave us a room. So every week the devotees would come into the campus in the van and unload prasadam and distribute prasadam, and people would pay a couple of dollars and take prasadam. And so I kind of organized. Then I was already entangled by that stage. I was the president of the club. So then I used to help distribute the prasadam. And then, I used to help distribute the prasadam, and then at the end, sit and take prasadam with the other devotees who were preaching there, and they would just preach to me, talk to me. So in this way, you develop relationships with devotees, you develop friendship with devotees, and that's it. I mean, then your material life is finished. Once you have devotees who are your friends, who know you, there's no turning back at that stage. I remember another devotee, he's Chakra Prabhu, and he said, he spoke to me on the phone, and I was saying something, yeah, I'll be there and I'll help with the prasad. And then he told me he hung up the phone. This was later after I'd become a devotee. He said he hung up the phone and he said to his wife, he said, that guy is finished. That guy is finished. But another thing, Sadbhuj Prabhu was Sadbhuj Prabhu, he was the temple treasurer. Yeah, and we used to go on Sankirtan with Sadbhuj Prabhu on occasions in Melbourne. So in that way, we gradually started going to the temple and associating with devotees. But on the topics of
prasadam had a significant
well, there's another
role in your
I hadn't
life.
finished the Korma story. He told me he had to get the club together and be get a few executive members of the club. I said, okay, that's fine. And then he said, maybe you have to ring a few people and get it organized. And I was thinking, I said, well, I might need some money for the phone. Thinking I'll get some money. I need some money to ring all those people. And probably Korma looked at me, and it was like I was shocked with what he said. He looked at me. He said, Krishna will help you.
Wow.
And I thought, that's not fair. I don't even believe in Krishna. How can you say that? You're not playing by the rules. That's not fair. But he said, Krishna will help you. Krishna will help you. Oh. And anyway, Krishna did help me, because in the college where it was fine arts, where oil painting was the major, and we had studios. And in the studio I was working in, there was a little office in the corner, and there was a phone there. It was connected to the university network, and you could just call out anywhere on the phone. So so Krishna did help me.
Yeah.
And in this way we became more and more attached to the devotees and devotional service and taking prasadam. One day I remember they called me. I was at the restaurant and taking prasadam. They called me. They said, hey, you like halava, right? You like halava? I said, yeah. Oh, yeah, of course, halava. And so they said, well, we've got some leftover from the temple. We've got leftover halava. I said, okay. They said, you want to take it? I said, okay. So then they came with a big, like these black garbage bags, the big industrial sized black garbage bags. One of those was half full of halva. There was about 30 or 40 kg of halva. And they said, yeah, you can take it. So I'm like taking it back on the train, back home, halva. And I remember I was staying with a few students. We were renting a place there. And I remember I took all the shelves out of the fridge. Took all the shelves out, and I shoved the halva in there and closed the fridge door. And then we sustained. It was, I still remember now, prasadam's so transcendental. I still remember now, it was banana halva with dates, right? And we had it stuffed in the fridge, and we sustained our lives, about 4 students, we sustained our lives exclusively on that halva for about 3 weeks, every day, just, peeling off. Because I remember by the end, the bananas had turned black, the bananas had turned black, but it didn't matter. It was still, even halva in the fridge
like
for
the
3
dates.
weeks.
They looked like the dates by the time you finished it.
That's right. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that, Krishna probably, was pleased by that service attitude of not wasting the prasadam. But let me get on to the books. So the books, we're talking about the books. I remember the first book I got was Easy Journey to Other Planets. Easy Journey.
And it was the same restaurant?
Yeah, it was they were on the table. They just have them on the table there, free, the small books, just you could take the free the books. And Easy Journey to Other Planets, that style, Prabhupada style, is a little different in that to his later books. That was written in the 50s in India, and the language is pertinent for that time. He uses words, scientific words. It was difficult for me to understand, actually. Even though I was trying to read, I didn't like devotees say they read one page and then everything changed. It wasn't like that for me. I was reading, and it was like, I remember, but I was very covered over. I was going regularly to the Sunday programs. At first, I thought Prabhupada was God in the temple. I thought that's God at the back, And then I remember it took me about 6 months to realize that the Krishna that they're talking about, that's the God, conception that we have God, the Krishna is God. So we were very covered over. But I remember one incident about this. This is a collector's item. I don't know if you've seen these. But
this is my first time of looking at this, but it looks so beautiful, Prabhu.
Yeah. So this is a collector's item. These were published by the BBT in the 1980s, and it's a set. It's a set. Inside is the you open it up, inside is a red book and a red book and a green book of the Krishna books, red and green, like that.
Beautiful.
So these, we used to, the devotees would distribute these, and in those days, I think it was even, from what I remember, it was free. The book distribution was free in those days in Australia. They would have festivals and distribute books for freely. So anyway, I had this. It was like we thought it was like a box of chocolates. It was like so attractive, and on the side there it says Krishna. And I remember this is not the one. This is a later one that I got here in India, and I've kept because I know it's a collector's item. So anyway, I had that with me, and I had it on the shelf, and occasionally I would take it and I read it. So I remember the first time I read it, I took it out, I opened it up, and I opened up the first volume. And I remember the story that I read. It was Krishna delivers the wives of the Brahmins. That story in Vrindavan, that they go. And I remember I was on a train and I read the whole story, and it was, quite an amazing story. Krishna and Balaram in Vrindavan, and they're hungry, and all of these things, which were just like concepts, which are just like so extraordinary. God is hungry, and they're boys, and they're in the forest, and there's cows, and there's Brahmins doing sacrifice, and there's different the sacrificial offerings and different things. And there's it was like such levels of reality that I just never conceived of before. There's puja and there's worship and these things, and they're asking for the prasadam and all of these things, which of course Bhagavatam is an inundation of Vedic culture and Vaishnava culture. And so this way it's very attractive. And I remember reading the story, and at the end, there's a benediction. I forget exactly what the benediction is now, but many of the stories in the Krishna book, at the end, there's a benediction that, you become a king and rule many countries and then go back to Godhead at the end. So something like that was there. And I was thinking, this is pretty good, As later I learned from Srila Lochandas Thakur that Keval Ananda Kanda. It's very easy to advance in Krishna consciousness in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement, because it's based on hearing Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte. Based on hearing, the heart becomes purified. And I thought, well, this is pretty easy. I like these stories, and so I had a very good experience reading the Krishna book in that time. And I was not living in the temple.
Did you have a cultural familiarity with India to be able to appreciate what's written in Krishna books, especially that pastime about the Brahmana's wife? There are so many things mentioned there that even Indians today would find, oh, really? This is what happened. Did you have some cultural familiarity with India at that time?
Not really. But we were coming from an environment where it was we were reactionists, what you could say. What is the word? I was at school in the 70s. I went to primary school, high school in the 70s. So all of my teachers were hippie, 60s products, academics and from the 60s. And they were my teachers. And they were long hair and in the school. And these things about higher purposes of life were actually, I remember His Holiness Japadaka Swami Maharaj mentions that he saw a presentation on Buddhism when he was in school, and it had a big effect on his consciousness. And there's the Nirvishesh or Shunyavad. But because there's some values there of the Vedic Siddhanta that has an effect on us. So there were values there of renunciation. And we actually read a book in school. It was called Jonathan Livingston's Seagull. It was a standard curriculum book. It's an interesting book. This is a seagull. And this seagull, he's different from all the others. His name's Jonathan Livingston. His argument is that we have most of the seagulls think that we fly to eat. We fly to eat, and his idea is that we eat to fly.
Wow.
We eat to fly. So that book had an effect on me. It kind of awakened an interest in higher reality. And so we were interested in, as I mentioned, we were going to the bookshops, the Book Society and libraries and trying to understand the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And of course, it was all very dry. Everything, apart from Krishna consciousness, everything is very dry. When when you find spiritual books in India, they're very dry. I mean, you don't see colorful, rich, juicy pictures like you see in our books. They're dry. Maybe at best there's a black and white mandala in the front page, you know, some spiritual mandala, and the rest of it is dry paper, dry print, you know, and it's like you really got to squeeze it hard to try and get juice out of those books, in personal yoga books and philosophy books. But our books, I mean, like I was saying, I mean, this, you know, I mean, it was like such a treat, you know, and the spirituality, everything about Krishna consciousness was so attractive to me. I was a sensitive person. I was an artist in art school, and you know, I remember just going to the temple one afternoon and seeing a householder couple walking in the neighborhood. That's our temple in Albert Park. Prabhupada used to walk on the beach there, Albert Park Beach. You can see those videos. And that Grihastha couple were wearing dhoti, sari, and a little child, one little kid, a boy in a dhoti and a little girl in a sari. And as we were driving to the temple, they were crossing the road. I saw that image. They're walking, the wind blowing, and you know, the dhoti and the breeze and the sari, and they're Western people. And I just thought, you know, I want to live life like that. You know, I want to live life like that, a spiritual life. It was like such a. I mean, we used to use the word far out. You know, just the life is so boring. It's so predictable. It's so mundane. There's nothing in there. There's nothing, no enjoyment. But this is such an exquisite, such a fascinating lifestyle. And then everything in the temple was so sensually attractive to me. The bhajan kirtan, you know, the harmonium. They had tabla, they had a veena in the temple in Melbourne, and then agurabati. You know, the fragrance. Like I said, Gorma was the pujari, and he'd do that. He would later I became a pujari and was serving with korma at the greeting, the Shingara Arati, greeting the deity. Korma he would have frankincense, and he would hold, you know, he would wait until the whole deity room was like completely full of frankincense before opening the curtains. So the conch would blow, and then the curtain, then it'd be like billows of frankincense, and the Lord would be there. Go, oh man. It's such a sensual experience. Bhajan, the sound of the bhajan, the kirtan, the deity is so beautiful. And then, of course, the prasadam. Coming from a fine arts background, I was completely enamored by the color of the prasadam. I'd never seen food that was that color before. The yellow rice, and there was shark, which was like green, like luminous and green shark. I think there was a green burfi as well, green burfi. And chutney, red chutney, and pakora is golden brown. But the thing that really, as they say, blew my mind was there was malpura. Malpura, not the Indian style malpura, which is just like a deep fried pancake in sweet. This was I'm not sure what it's called, but they called it malpura in the West. It's like a dumpling, soft dumpling. It seems like a steamed dumpling, and it's soaked in dahi, in the shrikant. You know, shrikant. So that was the flavor of that was, I think it was blueberry malpura. So that was purple. That was purple. I'd never seen purple food before in my whole life, you know, and I'm purple. Okay, yellow rice, brown and golden and green, but then the purple. And then when I said, what is this? This purple food? And I tasted the malpura, and then the taste, you know, there's a little bit of a zing, a little ting there in the shrikant, you know, and it was like, you know, that was it. I was done after that. I still remember that plate of prasada. After that, I was
many of our previous speakers, Prabhu, they've talked a lot about Srila Prabhupada's creative genius in terms of the detour that he took from the standard way of publishing books to the way he published his books, and you just appreciated that. And Prabhupada said his books are like sugar dolls, sweet anywhere you taste.
Yeah.
Just something to that effect. How was it in the temple and the other devotees? Did they also have a similar affection for reading Srila Prabhupada's books in those days?
Well, another great soul that I received mercy from in those days was Anirudh Prabhu. Anirudh Prabhu, yes. Deputy and temple president in Melbourne for 3 decades. So at that time, he was full set book distribution coordinator. Full set book distribution coordinator, Anirudh Prabhu. And he met me, he preached to me, he sold me a full set of the Bhagavatam. So I've always considered that I had that connection with Anirudh. I mean, we're close friends for many decades, but he delivered me. He sold me that full set of the Bhagavatams, and I bought that and was reading the Bhagavatams. So devotees. I mean, the 80s.
This was before you joined the temple, I believe.
Yeah, this was just when I was regularly coming and following Krishna consciousness, and then eventually I got an opportunity to move into the temple for a month. For a month. And after a month, I didn't leave. There's people, I kind of made an arrangement. I'll just stay there. We were living with people, and they went off somewhere. And I said, I'll just move into the Haris for a month. And then after a month, they came, and I said, I'm staying. I'm not going. By then, I got like so much strength as a result of Sadhu Sangha, strength. And I remained in Melbourne Temple for 12 years. I lived as a brahmachari in Melbourne Temple for 12 years. I remember in that beginning period there, I had a weekend free, and so I got the Bhagavad Gita, and I remember I spent the whole weekend just reading the Bhagavad Gita. It was open all the time, you don't close it. The book was just open all the time, and I was just reading it the whole time. At that time, I was not sufficiently purified to fully appreciate Prabhupada's purports, but I liked the translations. I liked the translations. That was just like fascinating. I mean, God is speaking and in such detail and so many things, and changing bodies and the modes of material nature and dealing with desire, so many things. Prabhupada's purports are always very, you could say very, conclusive. Chant Hare Krishna, surrender to Krishna. So, they were quite, a lot of commitment required, but the purport, the verses, reading the translations was something that really it absorbed me, enamored me, and I did that gradually. And then gradually, we joined the temple and became full-time and preaching there and collecting and Sankirtan in Melbourne during the 80s and from mid-80s to mid-90s. I was in Melbourne doing Sankirtan.
So during that period of mid-80s to mid-90s, was where the other devotees, did you have other mates who would sit together and read in the temple? Like some temples we hear every evening devotees would read Krishna book, like in the 70s. What was the culture like in Melbourne in terms of reading Prabhupada's books?
Fortunately for me, I consider it a fortune. I didn't remain in the temple so long. Actually, I remember there was 3 altars there: Radha, Bala, Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, and Susi Gaunitai. Big, huge deities of Gaunitai. Apart from Panchatattva in Mayapur, they're the largest Gaunitai deities in ISKCON. They're very large Gaunitai deities. In fact, you can see that the temple, which the devotees shipped from Jayapur, the temple's actually a little small, and Gaunitai actually, they're almost spilling out of the sides of the marble temple. You can't quite see sometimes they're obscured their hands, etc. And so the first services I had was cleaning in the temple. And we would take the Mahaprasadam plates from the altar, 3 plates. I mean, big plates, the same as in Mayapur here, big plates, 3 big plates. And the service of this temple cleaner, kitchen cleaner, well, you'd take the Mahaprasadam plates back from the altar, and then you go into the deity room, you lock the door. You had complete control, complete for the Mahaprasad. This was the dilemma that I was facing, Tapan Mishra Prabhu. Still to this day, I haven't worked out, the mathematics of this, but there's 3 plates. There's 3 plates. And in those days, the men and the ladies, we took prasadam separately, but men in one room, ladies in one room. So 3 plates, you had to divide it into 2. It was very difficult for me. Maths was never my strong field at school. I went to the arts. So I just simply, 3 plates, got to divide into. So 1 plate for the men, 1 plate for the ladies, 1 plate for the plate cleaner. So for about the first 6 months, I just lived exclusively of Mahaprasadam. I remember I didn't even leave the temple. I never even went out of the temple for 6 months. I just ate Mahaprasadam. Did
that parampara continue after you left that service?
I think that they may have systematized things a little more and made them a little less spontaneous. And now systematized things. So then
Mahaprasad and immense mercy.
So we took prasadam. Now in the temple, and I always see also sometimes devotees in the temple. It's not so easy to regularly read for devotees in the temple unless you have a group of devotees and you have a program, a scheduled time of the day, because temple life, it's almost like you're always tired and you sit to read. So anyway, after that 6-month period, then I was out on traveling Sankirtan, and I was reasonably okay in meeting people and extracting funds from there. And that quickly became my major way of contributing to the movement. For more than 10, 15 years, we did that. We were doing Sankirtans. On occasion, we'd do Sankirtan, but we also did a lot of collection in those days. We did a lot of collection. And so I kind of focused on that and was quite good at that. And so the temple were happy to have me just, the collectors got facility. We had our own vehicle and we traveled. And the type of savor that we were doing, the type of collection we were doing, we were actually going to the rural areas of Australia, interior Australia, to the farmers. In Victoria was dairy farmers. They're not so outback, but up in New South Wales, it gets more outback. We'd go there. Sometimes you'd meet 3 people a day on Sankirtan. You go from one station, they call them a station, a sheep station, one to the next. You get to 3 a day and meet people. But in Victoria, there were farms so close together. There was irrigation and there was regular rain, and there were dairy farmers all through the rural areas of Victoria. So the program with dairy farmers is interesting because they milk the cows in the morning, and then they come home, and around about 10, 11, and sit around the house and the farm and kitchen, and then go out again in the afternoon at 4 or 5 to milk the cows. So the dairy farmers, you can guarantee you'll find the dairy farmers and the family at home from about 11 onwards, or 11 till 2 or 3. They're always at home. So that was a good, we'd just go. And we used to use the Country Fire Authority maps, which we would get from this fire authority center in the city in Melbourne, and they had the whole state mapped out, every building. So the fire authority would use those so that, in case there's a fire, what buildings are there. So every residence and every road and everything, and sometimes there were the names, that we had these maps, and we would systematically go to every farmer in the district, And the thing about the dairy farmers was that we'd start about 11. We start the day about 11 and go out. And so it was in the middle of the day, that's when they'd be home. And sometimes you'd have to go back in the evening, but generally. So then we would go to the rural areas with 2 or 3 brahmacharis, and we would camp in a camping area, as Sankirtan devotees do. We'd get a van. We each had vehicles because we would work individually. We would go and visit people, meet them in your own vehicle. And so we would be in the caravan park, 3 or 4 brahmacharis, and we would be able to, in the morning, I could study for hours every day. In fact, as you mentioned, I'm a teacher and those things. I mean, most of the philosophy, most of my development in Krishna conscious philosophical understanding was cultivated at that time, actually. I remember the Bhagavad Gita. I didn't read anything else for 8 years, maybe a few things here and there, but just focusing on the Bhagavad Gita for 8 years, and the slokas, hundreds of slokas in Bhagavad Gita. And because it was no disturbance. We were in a little remote country town. It wasn't the holiday season. The caravan park was empty. We were the only ones in there. And be so quiet. We'd rise early. We'd chant, go for a little walk, chant our rounds. And then someone would cook and we could just read for hours and hours. So, I mean, literally, you had to have a study program, a personal study program. Otherwise, you couldn't keep yourself interested for like that hours and hours. So I read, all the books, the Gita so often, and then I read the whole Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita and learned slokas, and just kind of, completely absorbed myself in studying the books for that period. Whilst I was at Brahmachari, we weren't doing the type of preaching that I do now, meeting people, teaching and traveling and those sorts of things. As a Brahmachari, we didn't do that. We just, which is I feel, one of the assets or one of the facilities of brahmachari life, that you don't really need to worry about other people. I mean, brahmachari means study. That's what it means, to preparation. And then subsequently, I went to Bangladesh. I was sent to Bangladesh by the GBC.
But before we go to Bangladesh, it became clear that you actually used the fire department's maps to create a fire of Sankirtan. Not that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very
And
intelligent.
some
program.
places we went, There's a few little jokes I'll share with you. I remember one place we'd go back regularly, one caravan park. And so we got to know the manager, and he knew that there was like something about us. We're plain clothes, going out and meeting the people plain clothes. But we'd be there, and I don't know if this is a public joke, but anyway, it was funny. He was like, he said to me, he rang us one morning, we were going out, we were paying the bill, and he said, I'm okay with the incense in the curtains. The incense smell would be in the curtains, for weeks. Said we can tolerate that. And he said we can even tolerate the drum, because we had a drum, boom, 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 boom. That's all they heard. They did the drum, boom, boom, boom. And he said, but do you have to stand on the toilet seats? It's like a little joke there, traveling Sankirtan joke, that one. So we were in the caravan parks.
And you also mentioned that you had this privilege as a brahmachari, and you emphasized for all of us to learn that brahmachari life is meant for studying, as is described in Bhagavatam, and you made the most of that privilege, Prabhu, in terms of your studies.
Well, I could see that it's not easy for devotees to find time to study, especially devotees in administration and householders. You have to be very. It's great that you are encouraging the devotees to establish regular reading and study programs, because you need that sort of support. Maybe I'll mention a little bit about the Shashik degree program also shortly in that regard. That we need framework, we need encouragement, we need systems it's a rare soul that just has that determination to, out of duty, to just regularly read, or every day read Prabhupada's books. But I had that facility, no disturbance, we were collecting, so we had a lot of independence. We stay away as long as we liked. I would stay away basically based on my study programs. How long it would take me to complete that chapter, and then come back to the temple and like that. So it was very, very wonderful, and we absorbed ourselves in the philosophy, so deeply. That's brahmachari life.
And I'm very glad to know that you also had the support of the leaders, your managers and temple authorities to let you do that, because in some other parts of the world we were told, devotees could barely get time.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. It's like this facilities for a collector. You're a collector. You can, collectors can do what they like. As long as you keep collecting. As long as you. But for me, literally, it wasn't like an austerity, because I'd read for 2 or 3 hours in the morning, and then I'd just get in the vehicle, go out. My mind was so completely absorbed in the philosophy of meeting these people, collecting the funds. It was like I could have done anything.
This may seem like an obvious question, Atul, Krishna Prabhu, but earlier on you mentioned that the first time when you picked up the books, The Easy Journey to Other Planet and Bhagavad Gita, you weren't really so keen to go and read the purports, etc. But then in the following 12 years, from what you now describe, you were reading a lot. Can you share with us what was really happening? What got you immersed into?
Yeah, a couple of things. One thing, Krishna Prabhu, he said in the class, he said he was sitting and gave a class, and there was a few. Prana also joined at the same time. He was also from college, just down in the next college up from Melbourne University, and he joined at the same time. He stayed on at university and went and did subsequent studies, masters in education and things, and then got involved in the Gurukul. But we joined at the same time, Prana, myself, and in Melbourne, and another devotee who's now the TP in Perth, Yadushester. We're all from the university program preaching in Melbourne. So we're all sitting there, we're all living in the temple, sitting there. And Korma said, those of you who are coming from background of academics and education, he said, you should make it your responsibility to study Prabhupada's books and teach them to humanity. He said it in the class, but I just thought that, okay, he's talking to me, and I took it seriously. Because I remember that I used to write essays, actually, in those days when we were out on the traveling. I used to write essays I would pose my own philosophical questions on Ishopanishad, about what's the evidence that there's a soul, what's the evidence that there's a spirit, and then I would write an essay because I was trained in essay writing from college time, high school. And my subjects at school were English and English literature, majored in English and English literature. And we were trained in how to write, composition, comprehension, how to plan an essay. So getting involved in teaching and training devotees in Shastric study always, for me, it's always, I feel that Krishna is so kind because he utilizes you according to your inclinations. I had that inclinations to, philosophy, study, teaching, explanation. I'm still waiting for the day when we can set up the public debate forums in ISKCON where we can have pundits come and discuss philosophical issues and have but it seems that most of our things are not so debatable except for the hot controversial issues. But, like a forum where you can make a presentation, a philosophical presentation, a thesis on philosophy, on the Bhagavatam, and have other scholars comment and give you comments, and we can develop such a forum in the movement. So yeah, I was stimulated.
Well, one way to look at it is, Atul, Krishna Prabhu, if we actually engage our energy in debating on those topics, which to a lot of us may seem non-debatable, but they are definitely from a Shastric point of view. I feel that if we start engaging energy in debating on those, perhaps the amount of energy that we spend on debating on other things will reduce.
Yes.
I don't take the merit away from that, but I just feel it just depends on where you want to engage. Because as we read Prabhupada's books, even today, there's so many questions that come up. Sometimes we just bury them at the back of our mind, saying, this is not a question I want to ask. But that would be excellent if you reach that level in ISKCON.
Yeah, we should.
Where open debates happen. Wow. Atul, Krishna Prabhu, you were mentioning earlier that you moved to Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Completely different country, different language. Did you carry your books with you? And how was the transition? What was the culture there?
We'll come to Bangladesh. Another story about the books that after the rural, we'd exhausted all the rural farms in the different temples in Australia. We're doing it all over Australia. So when we moved off to the different countries, you can ask the devotees from that area, they'll know about the roaming parties from Australia that used to go all over the world. So the subsequent years, I ended up traveling all over the world, extensively. We went everywhere, Africa, the Scandinavia, Caribbean, all of these remote places where there wasn't so many temples. We would go there and collect in those places. So I remember we also had standard issue with those. I was very young, and so our Sankirtan leader, they just arranged everything for us. They bought us all the Samsonite briefcases, right? Samsonite briefcases. And he had a slightly bigger one. We all had a medium-sized Samsonite briefcase. I remember I flew into London and I got a tourist visa, and they asked immigration, why are you carrying a briefcase? I said, it's full of books, spiritual books, I'm into philosophy. Anyway, in my Samsonite briefcase, I had just enough room for the Bhagavad Gita as it is, for one volume of the Bhagavatam, and the all-in-one Chaitanya Charitamrita. And that's what we carried around. There was no digital books in those days, so we carried this briefcase. The other boys, I remember they had different things in their briefcase, but that's what I had in my briefcase. The Bhagavad Gita, the one volume of the Bhagavatam, and I would change the volume of the Bhagavatam accordingly as I was reading through that. I remember we were arrested in Tunisia, North Africa, Ghana Samudra, and Sadhuj and myself and a few other devotees. We had two parties. We were arrested there, and we were taken to the detectives, the local, like the local Tunisia CIA kind of department, local home, what do they call that? The
Homeland Security.
The Homeland Security Department. Yeah. So they thought that we were somehow they thought we were from the CIA. It's a Muslim country, this, Tunisia.
Yes,
at that time, they thought we were from the CIA. And then recently there'd been an assassination there of some PLO people that were sheltered in that country by Israeli commandos. And so they were looking to blame it on somebody, and they got these 6 Australians, and they're trying to, interrogating us for days on end. And I remember that the chief of the Homeland Security, the officer there, he's we were saying we were artists. We were artists traveling in the country of artists. And he's got my briefcase there. He's looking at the books, and the Sanskrit there, and the Bengali, and the Bhagavad Gita. And he looks at me and he says, you know, what sort of an artist are you? Why are you carrying these books? You know, what is your manifesto? You know, like, and then this will make you laugh. He opens the Nectar of Devotion, and he's flicking through the Nectar of Devotion, and he gets to chapter 4. Chapter 4 is entitled,
I can't recall, sorry.
Devotional service surpasses all liberation. He looks at me and he says, he reads the title of the chapter. You know, he's a heavy guy. He reminded me of Marlon Brando. No, not Marlon Brando. Charles Bronson. For those of you from the 60s and the 70s, if you know Charles Bronson, you know, he was an action actor from the Americas, big mustache like this, Charles Bronson, very like heavy guy. So this guy just reminded me exactly of Charles Bronson. He's flicking through Nectar Devotion. He gets to chapter 4, he looks at the title, he reads it. Devotional service surpasses all liberation. He looks at me and says, liberation from what? So, you know, we got a chance to preach to these people a little bit about, you know, repeated birth and death. And so in those days, yeah, we used to carry the books with us everywhere. And then eventually, as you mentioned, I went to Bangladesh, and then there was a whole different, fortunately, I had such a well-established reading program for years and years, more than 12 years too, that it sustained me in Bangladesh. Because in Bangladesh, we were on a party with 20 brahmacharis. We had a van, a Suzuki van, and we were constantly on the road. I traveled around Bangladesh, every place, all the districts, many times for 2 years permanently on the road. And that was not so easy to maintain the same study habits. It wasn't there. It was a completely different environment. In traveling Sankirtan in the West, we were the king of the show. No one told us what to do. We organized everything, when we ate, when we slept, when we collected, when we worked, when we studied, everything. We were just completely, that was why the program was so good. It was just a completely fine-tuned program for sadhana. But there, it was complete opposite. I mean, every day was different. Every day was different. And basically, I didn't know Bengali at that time. Krishna Prabhu, he was my guide. He knew English. And he would just say, Prabhu, now we go for the program. Prabhu, now we go to take prasadam. Prabhu, now we go to take bath. Now we get to the bus. Now we're going to the next place. Now we're going to it's just like, completely disorientating type of a program. Eventually, I settled in Mayapur and was able to get involved in actually Janmashtami Prabhu. Janmashtami Prabhu inquired one day. He said, "Would you like to teach something?" I'd given a class. Someone asked me to give a class here in Mayapur, and some people liked the class, and then so they suggested he was looking for teachers. And I mean, in those years, I used to think everybody was studying the books the way I was, because devotees would, in class, they would say, you have to read for an hour, you have to study the book. So I thought everybody did it. Everybody did. But I mean, if everybody did it, and people they sometimes say to me that I know the philosophy, I'm learned, but I'm not learned. But I just did that. I just did the basic thing of regularly reading and learning the important slogans and learning the philosophy. I just did that, and that was sufficient, But not enough devotees do that. Otherwise, our movement will be full of learned scholars. If we just did that, just read for an hour a day and took notes on the important points and like that. So in Bangladesh, yeah, things were different, and then I learned Bengali. And what can I say? Subsequently, now my meditation on reading is more. I read Bengali. I read Bengali texts. I read Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Bhagavat. And I read Prabhupada's books as translated by Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj in Bengali as well, because it's kind of like I'm doing both things there. I'm reading, and I'm also following the order of my mantra guru to, study Bengali and preach in Bengali.
Prabhu, during that time, of course, in many parts of the world, the movement also went through ups and downs, and I'm sure that happened also in Australia and other parts. your habit of reading Srila Prabhupada's books every day and that of other devotees, how did that help you go through the turbulent times that devotees sometimes witness in their lives with respect to the institution of ISKCON, with respect to what may be happening in the movement, like that?
Yeah, sure, it helps. I mean, of course, reading the books. Nyam labba chapanam manyate narikam tata. Upon gaining this, one thinks there's no greater gain. Shtito yashmin nadukena gurunapi vichalyate. And being so situated, no, one is never shaken, even amidst the greatest difficulties. Shtito yashmin nadukena gurunapi vichalyate. 6th chapter Bhagavad Gita. Even in a very gurunapi, even a very serious calamity, Shtito Ashmi, a person is not, they're not upset, they're not disturbed because of absorption in Krishna consciousness. Yeah, I was going to, that was another thing I was going to share about. I was in Nigeria, Lagos. We were collecting there in Lagos. And like I say, it's not really my nature, that sort of thing. I mean, I'm not a businessman type of thing, but it was the need of the hour, the temples. There was an exodus of devotees in the mid-'80s where we had the leadership challenges, and so there was an exodus of a lot of devotees. So those that remained, the burden of maintaining the temples, big temples and projects, fell on us. So we were focused on collecting, and we would go abroad and go to Nigeria. And being from Australia, we had special you could say features which enabled us to meet big people and collect money and take their money. And but I would similarly study a lot, and then we would stay in hotels and remote in these cities, and 2 or 3 devotees did the cook, in the hotel. But then similarly, we had a good study program. When you're away from the temple and away from the general association of the devotees, then it was very, very important. Pinto the shabda hoche, aste goro. When you're away from the association of the general devotees, then the study program becomes so essential. I mean, you survive just because of the regular study and the hearing and learning slokas. I remember that, I used to carry the sloka in my pocket, a shirt pocket, top pocket, or every day. And we'd be traveling a lot. I'd be standing in immigration queues. I'd just be learning slokas the whole time. I remember when we were arrested there, they also found this, on index cards. They found index cards. Yes. They had a sloka in the pocket, and they're looking at the sloka. It was this one that I don't remember it now, but it's in the purport to 10.8 that about Narayana Para Deva Chaturmukha, that Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma come from Lord Narayan, and Narayan is supreme. And they're reading this sloka, and they're trying to work out what's this code language, and what's this here? There's a special code, it's a secret. What do they call that? The code. Yeah, a secret code breaker that you write messages to your agent, your handler.
The cipher, encrypted ciphers.
So at that time, I met with His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. He was in Lagos. He'd be in Lagos, and we got some quality association with Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj. And I was saying how actually I'd like to be preaching, but I'm just collecting all the time. And he said, it'll come. He said, it'll come. And of course, his words came true. And I subsequently now, for the last couple of decades, have been totally involved in Brahminical seva, teaching and preaching, and then I'm able to maintain myself like that. But he said it will come. But I remember he was encouraging me. I said to him, I'm not into this. I just read and I learn slokas. I read the books, and then in order to confront, in order to deal with what I have to deal with in the day, my mind is in learning slokas and just remembering the philosophy. When I'm dealing with people, I'm not really fully focused on that. I mentioned that to him, you see. So then a few days later in the class, I remember His Holiness was giving the class, and he's searching for the verse, and he looks at me and says, "What is that verse?" Just to kind of encourage me, appreciate, that endeavor. So they were 2 facilities that I had, a lot of travel in Australia and then abroad, and really that helped fix me up in a very solid study program, which sustained me in my subsequent years as a teacher. It's when I started preaching in Bangladesh, I realized that actually I don't need to know all of this philosophy. But when it comes to preaching, you to the new people, we were doing public programs, And I was thinking, I'm kind of like I'm overly trained for this. It's like, overly qualified for this. You're just simple, very simple stuff, that you preach, and more like, we were more like transcendental entertainers. That was what they wanted, transcendental entertainment, rather than, slokas and philosophy and this and that. So it was, preaching's a little different. You have to, you know yourself as the philosophy and its intricacies and its detail, but a good preacher is the person who, you have to know what to give people, not just what you may be studying at that time or what you're absorbed in. You have to know, how to inspire people and how to attract their minds. And so that's a whole different thing. And basically, we focus on that more as a preacher in terms of making a presentation to ignite the fire in other people. But I was fortunate to be able to be involved in, when I got to Bangladesh, the preaching developed, not that I was, not because of me going there, but it was coincidental. We started sending preachers from Bangladesh to Pune for training under Srila Prabhu in the college preaching. Up to that time, our preaching had been simply a Pandal program in the rural areas, and then we had a few temples in Dhaka and in Chittagong, a few places, but it was Pandal programs and preaching to the mass of people. We hadn't really done college preaching the way it had been begun by Radheshyam Prabhu and his teams in West India. So then we began that in Bangladesh, college preaching, and then the movement changed. It developed so rapidly. I saw over the years that we started college preaching and attracting the educated youth. And then because at that time I'd got involved in Shastric study in Mayapur, so I was able to be instrumental in helping set up the Shastric study systems in Bangladesh. I was able, because they didn't know anything. I remember we were on a boat in a remote place. We were going in the jungle. We were going this loka, this boat, going in this thick jungle out to this village to do program. Krishna Prabhu was there, Jagat Guru, and a few other the leaders on the party I was with. And I said, why don't you guys do Bhakti Shastri? Why don't you do Bhakti Shastri? And Jagat Guru Prabhu was interested. I said, I can help get it set up. And so, we got things translated in Mayapur, and of course in Mayapur, so we started up Bhakti Shastri. And so subsequently now we have, like, for example, so I was instrumental in helping to usher in systematic Shastric study in Bangladesh, and help develop that and guide devotees and inspire devotees in that way. Now, for example, recently, or not recently, but last time I visited North Bengal, where our Bhakti Priyam Gadadhar Swami Maharaj is. He came for our educational convention here in Mayapur last time. Yes. I was there, but Maharaj said there's 70 people here who are ready to become teachers. 70. I had to do teachers training there like 3 times, and they were all professional people. North Bengal, 70 people. We did teacher training in Bengali for those people, and they're all teaching Bhakti Shastri and Bhakti Vaibhav all throughout North Bengal, and literally they are destroying the Upper Sampradaya movements. That, of course, they were ISKCON's presence there already had a big. They put so much damage to the Upper Sampradayas that had previously the Goswamis and the Jati Goshais and the Sahajiyas in East Bengal. That's where they're from. That's the East Bengal is the home of the Sahajiyas, and they're being destroyed, by the systematic study and propagation of Prabhupada's teachings by hundreds of teachers who are teaching Shastrik degrees, teaching Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhav, and literally indoctrinating the people of Bengal again in their Siddhanta, the Gaudiya Siddhanta, as is given in Prabhupada's books. And so that was a great blessing that I received from my Mantra Guru, that I was able to use that experience and training that I had to make a big, impact on the preaching in that part of the world. Mahaprabhu said to Nityananda Prabhu on several occasions. The first time he said in Jagannath Puri, 15 chapter Madhya Lila, Mahaprabhu said, Nityanande, Prabhu Agyai, Jao go to Deshe, Anar Gao, Prem Bhakti Koraho Prakashe. Mahaprabhu said to Nityananda, Nityanande, Prabhu Agya. He gave the order to Lord Nityananda in Puri. Nityanande, Prabhu Agya, Jao go to Deshe. You go to Bengal. Don't come to Jagannath Puri every year. Jao Bangladesh, Anargal Prem Bhakti Koraho Prakashe. Anargal, without restriction, Prem Bhakti Koraho Prakashe. You manifest and distribute Prem Bhakti unrestrictedly in Gaudadesh. So we don't see Mahaprabhu actually showing concern about a specific place like he did about Gaudadesh. Right? He said to Koma Brahman, he said, Jarideka Tarikaha Krishna Upadesh, Amaraga Guru Tara Desh, wherever you are, you preach, you preach. But so, where the people are, you stay and you preach here. But in Puri, he's worried about Gaudadesh. He's worried about Gaudadesh. And I can't go there, because of the order of my mother. I'm staying here in Jagannath Puri. So he's relying upon Lord Nityananda Prabhu to preach in Bengal, deliver. And that Mahaprabhu's desire, a strong concern. So therefore, I assume that we can conclude that preaching in Bengal is it's very much a concern of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the spreading of Krishna consciousness in Bengal, from his statements, is something that he's very much desirous of. So therefore, any low-born, jabon lecha, wretched person that does something for spreading Krishna consciousness in Bengal, this is a secret that one can one can please the Lord, one can become dear, one can become noticed by the Lord. So
well, in this case, the foundation that you helped set up there now is really bearing such wonderful fruits, as we can see from the expansion. I'm also aware you did something similar in another set of countries in the Middle East, where you came in, encouraged devotees to read, and once again, another area, and like you've done in many other parts of the world, but definitely these two parts, we owe you a lot, Prabhu, in terms of helping devotees develop this taste as is now.
All credit goes to my mantra guru, because I had no idea. When I was in college, when I was in Melbourne, I had no idea that I would go to Bangladesh. But he could see that I could, be engaged in that way. And so all credit goes to my mantra guru. And then something else. Yeah, another thing crossed my mind about, because I mentioned to you that I had a program last night, Balaram Desh. It was an online course. It's a bit frustrating for me to do the online teaching, because it's like, it's so restricted. It's like you're trying to do this.
You're boxed.
You're blindfolded, and your hands are tied behind your back, and you're kind of trying to do the same thing without being present there in the classroom. Yes. I realized last night you'd be able to use your vapu to be able to influence and to help learning. It's very difficult online. You don't have that. People you can't interrupt people. You can't be assertive where required, because there's so much technology in between you and the people. It's very difficult. Any case, last night we had a session, and we began. It was Bhakti Shastri teachers training, and we began, and I asked it because already these people are taking Bhakti Shastri, and now they want to become a teacher. And so I began the program. I said, if you'd like to, we'll go around the group, and if you could just share with us your realization on taking Bhakti Shastri, and then sharing what you learn in Bhakti Shastri with others, because now you're going to go on for more training in teaching Bhakti Shastri. If you just share your realizations on that. There was 9 students in the group, but literally I was shocked. As I mentioned to you, I wrote last night that now I'm a bit inspired to do this interview, because I just couldn't believe the devotees were sharing. They'd been devotees, they'd been initiated. Our preachers were coming and inspiring them, and now they had their weekly program, and that was enough for people, but they weren't really reading the books. And a devotee in that situation, it's not required so much. You come to the programs, you do kirtan, you listen to the class, you go home. You weren't really reading the books. But as you mentioned, we were able to give the framework and the format in which devotees could be encouraged to read. That's the whole idea of a course, that you with another group, with a teacher, there's lessons, you have to do preparation. It gives you a framework on which to induce yourself to read. So they began reading, and they took the course, Bhakti Shastri. And what the devotees were saying, how their lives changed so much as a result of understanding the flow. They never knew what Krishna consciousness was about until they until they went for a Shastrik course and started regularly reading. They never knew about a mission. a mission, the Prabhupada's mission, and how, you know, to connect to that mission, and how the books, and knowing the books, and then distributing the books and to humanity at large. They had no idea of these concepts, which is so important in our movement, in our sampradaya, that there's this movement, Srila Prabhupada. And you know, literally, I was completely, when Mataji was saying, oh, we used to just talk to people, but after we took Bhakti Shastri, we're able to talk to people. We're able to, because she said that, you know, you trained us to give evidence. You know, you would say, what evidence do you have to support that? And she'd said to me, you would say in the class, you have to give evidence to support. And therefore you forced us to learn the philosophy and learn the crucial verses. And he said, and she said, now I speak to people, I make a point, I say the verse, it affects them so much. It affects them so much. And I was thinking, wow, you know, you become empowered. This housewife, she's a housewife. She took Bhakti Shastri, she's learned verses, she preaches to people, she's an empowered preacher. She's an Antaranga Bhakta Mahaprabhu, Gauranga Shangiyon. Amaraga Guru Hoy Tare Desh, Jari Dekha Tarikaha Krishna Upadesh. It's there. And I was just thinking that the books are so powerful. The books are so powerful. You know, a little bit, even preliminary systematic study can empower you to become an agent of change in the lives of hundreds of people.
Yes.
And of course, it's all based on the fundamental principle of hearing. You know, you can't speak unless you hear. And the more taste that you have for hearing, you absorb yourself in the philosophy and the relish, the kotamrit, tavakotamrit, tapta jivanam, tavakotamrit. It's the amrit, the descriptions of tava, your descriptions, the gopi gita. Tavakotamrit is for tapta jivanam. For tapta means those who are suffering in this world. Those are tapta means those who are feeling the pressure of this world. Tapta jivanam. Those who feel the pressure of this world. The only relief is the tavakotamrit, the Krishna Prabhu. Katayantas chamam nitnam tushanti charamanti cha. This is the pleasure from discussing Krishna, hearing about Krishna, sharing Krishna's, and it's all in the books. You don't need to go beyond that. The books that Prabhupada has given us, the Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, the other books, there's a universe of knowledge. You don't need to go any beyond anything else. I listened to one presentation Achyutananda Swami gave recently. He was saying he was into yoga in the 60s and different things. He said he was pretty good at yoga too. And a little bit of this, but Buddhism, a bit of that. So when they got all they had was the first canto of Bhagavatam, first canto. You know those devotees from the early days, the first canto, they know it because that was the only book.
Yes.
The first canto. And Prabhupada put everything in the first canto.
Everything in it.
And he said, Achyutananda, he said that, you know, getting that book of Prabhupada, he said then it was like, you know, there was like a monsoon, a thunderstorm, just an ocean of knowledge that we had. You know, he's a philosopher. You know, there's an ocean of knowledge. There's no limit. There's no exhaustion. And to dive in to the ocean, Gopi Bhava Rashamrita Bilahrit Kolala Mogno Muhur, Gopi Bhava Rashamrita Adi, the Rasha Amrit Adi, the ocean of nectarian mellows of Gopi Bhav. Kalola Mogno Muhur, Bande Rupa Shanatano Rugo Shidiva Gopal. Kalola Mogno Muhur. Again and again, they dive into that ocean of the Bhav Rashamrita Adi, the ocean of nectar. And that's Prabhupada's books. The ocean of nectar of Prabhupada's books that again and again we dive into to bathe ourselves, to immerse our consciousness in Prabhupada's Vani. There's like you see that picture of Prabhupada sitting there with the dictaphone. He's giving his full mercy and attention and potency into that dictaphone. And that's just when we're reading, it's just like we're sitting there beside Prabhupada. He's whispering in our ear. He's just preaching in our ear about Atma Tattva, Bhagavat Tattva. And by associating with Prabhupada, we can get delivered.
Today, we feel empowered just by hearing from you. I mean, just the glimpse that you're giving about the potency of the books inspires us to read. And I'm sure all the guests here also feel the same. Atul, Krishna Prabhu, you know, I have to ask you for another time, one more time, to speak to you, because many devotees, some of you may not know actually that Atul Krishna Prabhu also serves as the chair or the convener of the Board of Examinations, which is responsible for establishing the Shastic education examinations and developing it. And Atul Krishna Prabhu, we must speak again one more time on just that, because there are so many wonderful programs you're undertaking there for expansion of Shastric education. Do you want to give us a quick 2-minute glimpse of what it is, and then we connect again and share with devotees on what?
Okay. Well, we've taken up the statement where Prabhupada made, because the mandate of this particular board from the GBC is to set examinations for the study of Prabhupada's books, and so we're taking up the comment of Srila Prabhupada where he spoke in 1969, and he said that my objective here is to encourage my students to read the books. So therefore, I'm giving this degree program because it's an additional incentive. Okay, let me read and get a degree. That perhaps many people without that incentive wouldn't be induced to read. And we kind of feel essentially that's the purpose of the degree program. That's to get people to just regularly, because if you go and get the degrees, you'll spend your life reading Prabhupada's books, because that's probably how long it'll take you to get through, to get to them all. And that's Prabhupada's idea, that you read, and when you're ready, take exams and get degrees, and in that way you'll become a habituated reader of Prabhupada's books. So we're trying to serve Prabhupada's family by making access to those higher degrees. Bhakti Vedanta, Bhakti Vaibhava, Bhakti Vedanta, Bhakti Shastri is kind of somewhat spread around ISKCON, but the higher degrees are not. But the study of the Bhagavatam, Bhakti Vaibhava, Bhakti Vedanta, Bhakti Sarvabhauma, and Prabhupada did mention that he was expecting all of his disciples by 1975 to have Bhakti Vedanta. So we're way behind. And so on this board, our current objective is to make these degrees more accessible, so that Prabhupada's vision of all his followers, particularly preachers and leaders in the movement, should have these degrees, and it should be publicly noted, and the degrees should have meaning in the movement. So we're trying to achieve that vision.
Well, we could, if all goes well, by 2025, 50th anniversary of Prabhupada's desire, probably that would come true with the guidance and the inspiration you're giving. Atul, Krishna Prabhu, how could I thank you more for your time today? I just feel that we must talk again, and there's so much more to ask. We've not even crossed Bangladesh yet. So I'm inspired after this conversation. I'm going to reach out. I reached out to Janmashmi Prabhu, and I'm going to reach out to him again to speak to him for a similar conversation. Him and Aniruddha Prabhu, I'm reaching out to them very soon for a similar conversation. Both personalities who I think have contributed a lot, like you have, in the lives of devotees, in teaching and inspiring them to teach. Prabhu, please give us time again, and we will reconnect. And next time when we speak, we request you to share with us your vision on the Shastric education and what other programs will be coming through. So to all our viewers, if you want to have this was just a sneak peek in the personality of Atul Krishna Prabhu and his affection for Srila Prabhupada's books, without which our lives would be incomplete, as we can see. And so Atul Krishna Prabhu, thank you again. And on this topic of Srila Prabhupada's books, I encourage all the viewers and guests, please go through some of the other videos and discussions we've done. Each personality that we speak to, they're able to unpack for us, give us their world of the life that they lived. And many a times, Atul Krishna Prabhu, rarely do we get to know that side of a personality. I did not know you were in Lagos. I didn't know you were in Tunisia being interrogated by Homeland Security, who were trying to figure out what are the ciphers on those cards, what code language are you doing. What an adventurous life. What an adventurous life where you had Srila Prabhupada's books as your constant companion. Please pray for us that after this we can do the same. Make Srila Prabhupada's transcendental books our constant companion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tapan Mishra. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. And all glories to Srila Prabhupada's transcendental books. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhyevacha patitanam pavnebhyo vaishnavabhyo namo namaha. Thank you, Vaishnava.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare